All right, let's do a review here of how you graph parabolas when they're in standard form like this. So here's negative a half times x squared minus x plus 1.5. So step one, now we know this is going to be a downward facing parabola because it's got a negative in front of the x squared, and it's 1/2. The coefficient is 1/2. This is called the leading coefficient, is 1/2. So that means it's going to open downward. The negative opens downward, and 1/2 means it's going to be a little bit wider than normal. Okay, and then minus x plus 1.5. So step one, factor out the negative 1/2. So if I take a negative 1/2 out of each of these terms, the x squared is just going to be positive 1x squared. If I take a negative 1/2 out of negative x, it's going to be positive 2x. To see why that makes sense, if I distribute this negative 1/2 back in there, negative 1/2 times 2 is going to give me negative 1x. If I take a negative 1/2 out of 1.5, that's going to be negative, and it's going to be negative 3. So when I take a fraction out or take a number out smaller than 1, these numbers here actually get bigger. So 1.5 becomes 3, 1 becomes 2, and of course we took out a negative, so they change signs also. Now we're going to see if we can factor what's left. So I have a negative 1/2 in front, and hopefully this term here is going to factor. Okay, so it's going to be an x and an x because it's got to multiply to x squared, and it's got to be a 3 and a 1 because it's got to multiply to negative 3. It can be a positive 3 or a negative 3, but we know it's got to be a 3 and a 1 if it's going to factor. And because it has to add to positive 2, the 3 is the one that has to be positive because 3 is bigger than 1. So if I have a positive 3 and a negative 1, that'll add to positive 2. So positive 3 times negative 1 multiplies to negative 3. Positive 3 plus negative 1 adds to positive 2. So that's the factors. Now right away that means we know some things about this. We know that negative 1 x-intercept is going to be at negative 3. So I'm going to put a dot at negative 3 on the x-axis. And the positive intercept is going to be a positive 1. So we know we're going to have x-intercepts at negative 3 and positive 1. So put 2 dots there on the x-axis at negative 3 and positive 1. Okay? So whatever makes these parentheses 0 is going to be where it crosses the x-axis. All right, next thing we're going to figure out is what's the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is going to equal the 2x coordinate or x-intercept. So it's going to be negative 3 plus 1. Those two x-intercepts averaged. So negative 3 plus 1 and then divide by 2. The axis of symmetry is going to be negative 2 divided by 2. So that's going to equal negative 1. So you can go to, negative 1 and put a dashed line if you'd like. Okay, that's going to be our axis of symmetry, the middle of our parabola. Now we're going to take that negative 1 and put it back into the original equation to find out what the vertex, the y-coordinate of the vertex. So this is the y vertex. I'm going to put negative 1 into the original equation, so it's negative 1/2 times negative 1 squared, take away a negative 1, plus 1.5. You can do this on your calculator. This one's pretty simple. We can do in our head. Negative 1 squared, remember PEMDAS, you have to do it in the right order. Negative 1 squared is 1 times negative 1/2 will be negative 1/2. Minus a negative 1 is going to be plus 1 plus 1.5. And that, of course, is going to equal negative 1/2, and positive 1.5 is positive 1, and positive 1 is going to be 2. So our vertex is going to be at negative 1 on the x-axis and positive 2 on the y-axis. So we're going to put a dot there. So negative 1 on the x, positive 2 on the y is right there. Okay. And now we can put it in standard in HK form, in plotting form. So it's going to be like this. So HK form. is going to be something like this. Blank times x minus blank squared plus blank, and that's going to equal y. So take our parabola that used to be in this form, negative a half x squared minus x plus 1.5, and we put it in HK form, which makes it easy to plot. So a number in front, and of course that's going to be the original negative a half. That doesn't change. So it's still negative a half in front. And then the y coordinate, the x coordinate of the vertex goes here, so it's going to be minus a negative 1. And then, so it's going to become plus 1. And then the y coordinate of the vertex goes here, so it's plus 2. Okay? And now we can plot the parabola really easily. We have the vertex. We know that the leading coefficient's negative a half, so it's going down. And instead of going over 1 and down 1, we go over 1 and down a half. So our first dot is right there. Do the other way on the other side, go over 1 and down a half. And now we've got 5 dots on our parentheses, or on our parabola. So it's going to look like this. And if you want to add some more dots, you can say, well, what happens if I go over 2? I go down, 2 squared is 4, so I went down 2 because it's half. If I go over 3, 3 squared is 9. I go down half of 9, which would be 4.5. So I go down 1, 2, 3, 4.5, dot right there. And over here, the same thing on the other side. If I go over 4, 4 squared is 16. I would go down 16, but because it's 1/2, I go down 8. So let's see if I can do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would be right here. On the other side, same place right there. So there's my parabola now. It looks like this. You only need 5 points, so you don't have to put these additional points on there, but you can if you want. You should do a check. Let me do one check. We can pick any point. Use your calculator, put it back in the original equation. Maybe I'll check this point right here, -4. So it's -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -5. So let me check -5 on the x-axis. And I'll put that into my calculator. I go -0.5, parentheses, -5, close parentheses, squared. And then minus a -5 plus 1.5. And when I do that, I get -6. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -6. So that point right there is -5, -6. And I'm going to ask you to draw a little arrow from that check to the point, so you can show me that you really did check that point right there. Okay? So that's how you graph parabolas. If they're in standard form, you change them into HK form, and then you can graph it like that. Thanks very much, and practice that, please. This is, by the way, the problem that is on the page 1 of the practice test for Chapter 2.